So how many fighters is President Obama's military training to go up against ISIS in Syria? Tens of thousands? Thousands? Hundreds? How about 5 dozen? This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Brett Baer. One day after President Obama reiterated his intention to degrade and destroy ISIS, his defense secretary was on the defensive on Capitol Hill. And jaws were dropping when he revealed the size of the force the U.S. is training to go into battle against the brutal but resourceful terror group. Correspondent Kevin Corke has our top story from the White House.
It was the kind of blunt assessment that the Senate Armed Services Committee asked for, but it didn't make it any easier to hear.
As of July 3rd, we are currently training about 60 fighters.
A stunning admission for a program that's been called an essential part of White House strategy to defeat ISIS. Just 60 Syrian volunteers being trained by U.S. forces to battle the terror group in Syria, a shockingly low number and far fewer still than the 90 volunteers Defense Secretary Carter claimed were being trained back in May.
This number is much smaller than we'd hoped for at this point.
I got to tell you, after 4 years, Mr. Secretary, that's not a very impressive number.
The administration's initial plans called for up to 300 trainees per class to undergo 6 to 8 weeks of training before joining the fight. The goal, train up to 5,400 fighters every year. But to date, a mere 60 have been cleared for training, while another 7,000 are still being vetted. White House officials expressed disappointment at the low number, but defended the rigorous vetting process.
Clearly that number is not enough, and what we need to do is continue to accelerate that training and equipping program.
The administration's three-phase strategy to counter ISIS in Iraq and Syria includes airstrikes to slow the group's territorial advances, major offensives to reclaim lost territory and weaken their military capability, and expanded training to produce enough local fighters to battle ISIS on the ground.
This will not be quick. This is a long-term campaign.
Meanwhile, yesterday at the Pentagon, the president called the fight against ISIS a generational battle for hearts and minds.
Ideologies are not defeated with guns. They're defeated by better ideas, a more attractive and more compelling vision.
An assessment that was mocked back on Capitol Hill.
When it comes to ISIL, President Obama's comments yesterday at the Pentagon reveal the disturbing degree of self-delusion that characterizes the administration's thinking.
And we have major news to report tonight involving the U.S. Armed Forces. We have learned that tomorrow the Army is expected to announce that some 40,000 soldiers will be cut from its ranks over the next 2 years, and that will impact both domestic and international posts as well. Along with that, Brett, 17,000 Army civilian employees are also expected to be laid off.
Kevin Corke live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thank you. The Taliban is claiming responsibility for a suicide car bombing attack on a NATO convoy in Afghanistan. Officials say at least 2 people were wounded when the blast went off on a road in eastern Kabul. No Americans were hurt. Hillary Clinton is sticking with her story about those controversial emails, personal email addresses and servers while Secretary of State. Clinton just gave her first major interview as a Democratic presidential candidate this time around. Correspondent Peter Ducey is here tonight with a breakdown. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Brett. The big headline from Hillary's first national TV interview as a candidate: she still doesn't think there was anything wrong with running her own email server, then deleting about 30,000 messages that she says were not work-related.
Let's take a deep breath here. Everything I did was permitted by law and regulation. I had one device. When I mailed anybody in the government, it would go into the government system. Now, I didn't have to turn over anything. I chose to turn over 55,000 pages.
And this evening, candidate Clinton also weighed in on what has become an important debate about sanctuary cities, saying San Francisco made a mistake by allowing the known criminal and repeat deportee Francisco Sanchez to stick around long enough to, by his own admission, murder Catherine Steinle in cold blood. But Clinton suggests that if Sanchez's record was a little shorter, then this would be a tougher call to make.
I have absolutely no support for a city that ignores the strong evidence that should be acted on. However, there are, like, if it were the first-time traffic, citation, if it were something minor, a misdemeanor, that's entirely different.
Earlier today in Iowa, Clinton revealed that she knows reporters complained about being corralled like cattle with rope while trying to take pictures of her, and based on her reaction, she's not too concerned.
Nick.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the equivalent of a rope you have up here? I think it should come down. I don't want anybody feeling...
Okay, we can do that. Would that make everyone feel good?
Sitting for an interview marks a shift in the Clinton press strategy. So why'd she do it? Well, Bernie Sanders, the socialist senator, is surging. The Sanders campaign has a bumper sticker that says, "Feel the burn." And now it seems the Clinton campaign starting to feel the heat. Brett?
Peter Doocy, thank you. The San Francisco sheriff just referenced is defending his office's decision to release a repeat offender and multiple-time deportee who's now accused, as you heard, of killing a young woman walking on the pier. The case has reignited the controversy over immigration in general and San Francisco's sanctuary policy in particular. And it is all playing out as part of the 2016 presidential race, as just referenced in that report. We have Fox team coverage. Carl Cameron here in the Bureau with the unintended consequences of Donald Trump's statements about Mexican immigrants. But we begin with correspondent Claudia Cowan live again tonight from San Francisco. Hi, Claudia.
Hi, Brett. Well, despite his jailhouse confession over the weekend, just minutes ago, an anxious-looking Francisco Sanchez pleaded not guilty to murder. He's being held on $5 million bail as authorities at all levels of government try to figure out how this man slipped through the cracks. Local law enforcement and federal authorities are playing a very public blame game as each accuses the other of allowing a 7-time felon with a long rap sheet to be set free. Francisco Sanchez had been in federal custody for 4 years when he was handed over to San Francisco authorities in March to answer for an old bench warrant on a minor drug charge, a transfer that was supposed to be temporary because he was going to be deported back to Mexico for the 6th time. But after those charges were dismissed, the sheriff's department released Sanchez without notifying Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Less than 3 months later, by his own admission, Sanchez shot and killed 32-year-old Kate Steinle on a popular San Francisco pier. Local authorities say if the feds wanted Sanchez back, they should have issued an arrest warrant.
They knew his history. They knew his history with deportations. We did not. They could have taken measures when they brought him here to make sure that there was a warrant or a judicial order which we would honor.
At a Senate hearing in Washington, ICE officials were on the defensive.
Tell me specifically what is preventing us when we have people in this country illegally and they have had 7 prior felony convictions. Why aren't we able to deport those individuals?
In that particular case, our detainer was not honored.
Who didn't honor it?
San Francisco Sheriff's Department did not honor our detainer that we lodged.
Now in the hot seat, San Francisco's Mayor Ed Lee issued a statement saying the city's sanctuary law was never, quote, intended to protect repeat serious and violent felons. But amid the growing scandal, Lee's called for an investigation into what happened by all of the local and federal agencies involved. Former San Francisco Mayor Senator Dianne Feinstein released a statement this afternoon saying Sanchez should not have been released, and she's looking into additional federal legislation to prevent this kind of thing from ever happening again. And Brett, as for Francisco Sanchez, he and all the lawyers are due back in court here at the Hall of Justice on July 22nd.
Claudia Cowan live in San Francisco. Claudia, thank you. Well, that situation in San Francisco is complicating matters for Republican presidential candidates who are trying to walk a fine line on the volatile immigration issue. And Donald Trump, while getting an outpouring of support in some quarters, also continues to pay an economic price for some of his comments. Chief Political Correspondent Carl Cameron has that part of the story tonight.
Exactly 3 weeks after his controversial presidential announcement speech in which he claimed illegal immigrants from Mexico are creating a crime wave of rape and murder in the U.S., Donald Trump's international empire has taken another body blow. The Professional Golfers Association today announced the 33rd PGA Grand Slam of Golf in October will not be held at the Trump National Golf Club of L.A. as originally planned because of Trump's political turmoil. The PGA and Trump 3 months ago signed a multi-year deal to bring the Grand Slam of golf back to the U.S. mainland for the first time in 20 years. Trump's campaign issued a statement saying, quote, "Due to the controversy surrounding statements made by Mr. Trump having to do with illegal immigrants pouring into the United States from Mexico and other parts of the world, Mr. Trump does not want his friends at the PGA of America to suffer any consequences or backlash with respect to the Grand Slam of golf." Trump's controversial assertion that the U.S. has become a dumping ground for undocumented Mexican criminals has hit home in other ways. Some workers on Trump's $200 million luxury hotel project in the old post office pavilion, just 5 blocks from the White House he hopes to occupy in D.C., immigrated here and in some cases remain here illegally, according to workers quoted by the Washington Post. Trump's top attorney told the paper that contractor Lend-Lease does the hiring and, quote, "The obligation to check all workers on site is exclusive to Lend-Lease." Former New York Governor George Pataki, who challenged his rivals to rebuke Trump 2 weeks ago, has now challenged the Donald to a debate, quote, "mano a mano." Another rival put it this way.
I think the comments he's made has allowed people that don't want to have a debate or talk about illegal immigration to distract from the very serious debate on hand.
It's also diverted attention from more than just the immigration debate. Rubio was in Chicago to tout his innovation and education agenda as superior to candidates from the past, meaning Bush and Clinton. This was his first big policy speech since announcing. And he got, well, trumped. Brett?
All right, Carl, thank you. Ohio Governor and expected to soon be presidential candidate John Kasich will be in our center seat at the bottom of the hour. Send me some questions for him right now. You can go to facebook.com/BrettBairSR or on Twitter @BrettBair. You can use the hashtag special report. We'll get some of those questions in. Up next, Europe tells Greece to get with the program now. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 59 in Indianapolis says FBI agents in Indiana State Police raid the home of Subway restaurant spokesman Jarrett Fogel. FBI sources tell Fox 59 it's in connection to a child pornography investigation. A former employee of Fogel's foundation has already been charged with production and possession of child pornography. Subway says it is very concerned about the raid. Q13 Fox in Seattle, where extremely dangerous conditions are making it difficult to recover the body of a 34-year-old woman who was buried when ice caves partially collapsed about 70 miles from the city. 5 other people were injured there. And this is a live look at Miami from our Fox affiliate WSVN. The big story there tonight, Carnival Cruises says it will soon offer trips from Miami to Cuba. That would make Carnival the first American cruise company to visit the island nation since 1960 trade embargo was put in place. The U.S. and Cuba plan to reopen embassies in Washington and Havana later this month. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.